And good evening and welcome to tonight's Order Paper Show. And I love it that you have managed to shock us all, including myself, by getting to bed and a missing Matthew Tukaki.
Yep.
Now, we are suspecting he will be late like he normally is, but that's no surprise. But how's it feel over the last week? Well, I got a haircut, you grew a beard.
I did. I'm feeling hairy today.
I'm kind of speechless.
Everyone keeps comparing me to Chewy, so I'm just like, oh, fuck it, might as well just get a beard.
Yep. So for those who are wondering what's happening on tonight's show, we will be covering the Health Select Committee hearing with the Smokefree, what is it called? I call it the vaping bill, the Smoke-Free Environments and Regulated Products Amendment Bill number 2. And I did go through doing some searching on clips earlier today and found out there's a big half-an-hour segment with Casey Costello on there being questioned by the ministers across the different party, not the ministers, the select committee members across the different parties. Some of them do have the title The Honourable. Then we'll get through to find some interesting submissions from the select committee, and then after we finish that, we'll head to the Crown Amendments Bill, where I believe there's a bit of a hidden Easter egg of a surprise coming up.
I'm going to keep wearing the beard until Matthew turns up.
Well, will he turn up? We don't know. I mean, I did see him a text message reminding him. But yes, now before we get to the fun part, let's get to some light-hearted stuff. And unfortunately, there's nothing in Parliament. So we've got to settle for something from Facebook. So, how do we find out? Will Simeon Brown go and introduce a law to ban vehicles from having 2 steering wheels?
It's pretty itchy.
It's pretty itchy. Well, you know, this is what happens after many years of not having a beard and suddenly having one. You do learn these things about itchiness. Yes, I don't know how what's he call it? Pat and Chewy managed to do it, but somehow they do. Same with Bruce Flavin, but then at the same time, he did sit there and say his beard was trademarked. Well, let's get off to see how Miss Costello. Oh, heck, that's in the same clip. Okay. Let's see how Miss Costello kicks off with her first submission on, not her submission, her bit on,
we have a 30-minute hearing with Ingrid's joined. Cool. A 30-minute hearing with the Honourable Casey Costello, Minister Costello, who is the lead minister on this bill, the Smoke-Free Environments and Regulated Products Amendment Bill number 2. Clark. Do we have the Minister ready? We do, here she is. Oh, good morning, Minister. How are you?
Good morning. We're just sorting out our IT issues here.
No worries. All right. Can you guys give me an audio at your end just to make sure it's loud enough?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good. Is that loud enough for everyone?
Sorry, I'll keep talking. You can tell me if that's gonna.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you, Minister, for joining us today. We've got you for 30 minutes. It's 9:05. We will let you go ahead and give us an introduction on this bill, on the Smokefree Environment Regulated Products Amendment Bill number 2, and then members are likely to have questions from there. But thank you for joining us, Minister Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a few very brief introductory remarks. Very pleased that the bill is in front of the committee, and the government said it would strengthen legislation to prevent youth vaping, and I want to acknowledge that all parties did support the bill getting to this stage, so I'm very pleased to be progressing this work. What I would emphasise is the purpose of the bill that we're discussing today is to prevent youth vaping. It sits within the government's wider policy and health objectives of reducing smoking rates and the harm from smoking and achieving the Smokefree 2025 targets. Our smoking rates have reduced rapidly since vaping became widely accessible. Nearly 230,000 people quit smoking in the 3 years to June last year. It's essential that we continue to have vape products available for adults who are using them to quit smoking, or who might use them to quit smoking. However, the number of young people vaping remains a concern. Vapes should not be targeted towards children and young people, and they certainly shouldn't be sold to them, and that is what this bill is aiming to stop. The committee will be aware of the main components of the bill, and I won't talk about these now, and I'm happy to answer questions. What I would accentuate is the bill is targeted at youth vaping. There is a next step of reform, which is to create a coherent and improved regulatory regime around all nicotine and tobacco products, so that we have a system that is aimed at reducing harm, that is coherent across products, and most importantly, enforceable. There are clear issues with the current regulatory regime, compliance and enforcement. New Zealand didn't have any regulations around vaping at all until 2022, and this bill's scope is specific to the prevention of youth vaping, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of the committee's work.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Minister. Given that we are holding this via Zoom alone.
So, to give a brief example of what the bill's trying to achieve?
Yeah, I've got the bill open here. It says increasing penalties for unlawful sales of regulated products to minors. It doesn't really specify what it's going to be.
So it could be sitting there issuing fines that could be cheaper than a packet of cigarettes, potentially.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe Select Committee will sit there and solve that. Let's continue.
Ask that people put their hands up. I know that, or use the icon to do so. Ingrid Leary has got hers up. I think we'll treat this how we usually treat it. So primary and then two subs. And then that way you get a fair shot at what point it is that you're trying to extract, or whatever question line it is you're trying to go. All right, Ingrid.
Thank you, Minister, for being available. Given the huge public interest in this, how is it that you can justify such a short submission process for the public? We as a committee have had a number of organisations actively approach us wanting to share their information and science around this, and their concerns about the fact that New Zealand is way above other countries that we compare ourselves to with youth vaping. There is a huge public interest, and yet the submission time is so short for the public. How do you justify that?
I think I respond in two ways. Firstly is that there is a significant program of work that will follow, and that will be reported back later this year around the entire regulatory regime. So I fully appreciate there's a lot of work we need to do in this space. This was very targeted to ensure that we get something in place to both increase the deterrent factors of enforcement, do some work around proximity, and then more importantly to clarify the types of products that we're going to allow into the market. But by no means is this an end position. We were very keen to ensure that there was something strong in place before next year, and we focused on that. And that's why this bill is a relatively small scope. There isn't definitely an assurance that we will continue to do further work around this regulatory regime and the legislation as a whole. And I think it's important that that's balanced with the fact that right now is about putting something in place. We know that there is a real issue around the deterrent component of the fines. We know that there is a real confusion around the types of products. And we wanted to make sure that the products that are used by young people are not available, and that's what this program of work is. So I think the assurances to the public and to the committee itself is that there will be a lot more work done in this space around how we manage this regulatory regime, but I think responding to the high public demand and also recognising that there has been significant work in this space over the last 3 years, or since really 2020 when we first started putting regulation in place. So we have learned a lot. I think there's a lot more knowledge in place, and the officials are aware that there's a lot more knowledge around what we're trying to achieve here. So I think moving forward, we have this is a sort of constrained piece of work around making sure we are responding firmly and strongly around youth vaping, but recognising that there is a lot of dialogue still to be had in this space, and we will continue with a broader program of work. As you'll be aware, this legislation has been tweaked and changed a lot since it first came into play, and that's a part of the challenges we're dealing with. But doing a broader piece of work, I was concerned that we wouldn't get the legislation in before the next school year, and I think we're really wanting to make sure that there is some strong actions in place and some clear messages being sent that it's still a priority.
But rather than rushing the legislation, wouldn't it be better to focus on enforcement? We have had evidence as a committee that there's been only 2 prosecutions taken over recent times against selling to youth. Clearly enforcement is an issue. Wouldn't it be better to get the enforcement sorted and slow down the legislation so people can have their say?
I think, yeah, that's a strong point, and that's why this isn't an either or, this is an and.
Sorry, I had to join in there.
Priority. We are doing a lot of work in that space. All of last year, we had 110 infringement notices issued for the whole of last year. We've had 119 issued up until 9th of September this year. All of last year, we had 1 prosecution. This year, so far, we've initiated 8 prosecutions this year. So there has been a significant ramp up. We also know that last year we had very little enforcement capability dedicated to the tobacco space. We are on target to have our full strength of 16 enforcement by the end of this year. So I can assure the committee there is a strong focus on enforcement, regular accountability around what we've been delivered. And I think we're seeing that the results in the increase in prosecutions. I think the increase in penalties will be a significant factor to improve that enforcement. But again, reiterating, we're not talking about this as the end position. There's further work to be done. But definitely enforcement is an important component, and it's and definitely in this space.
Given, final step through you, Mr. Chair. Given the narrative around your links to the tobacco industry, given the tax cuts to big tobacco, given the public's concern over that, wouldn't you be better to allow more time to get the legislation right and also enhance your own credibility when it feels to members of the public that this is just an agenda to fast track things in favour of big tobacco and in favour of vaping?
I'm going to strike that one out. I think the Minister has said numerous times and in the House that she doesn't have any links to big tobacco, so we're not going to have questions that are premised on stuff that the Minister has already said aren't factual. So thank you, Ingrid. No.
Order, Mr. Chair, this is about perceptions. I certainly didn't suggest that the Minister does, but there is a perception that I think from a process perspective the Minister needs to answer. So that is to not cast any aspersion on links, but to say there is a narrative where the process, good process, would require a different response, and I would really like to hear the Minister's response to that.
I think you were inferring that, and that's the way I took it, and I'll be the judge of that. The Minister doesn't have to answer the question. She may if she wants to. But then
I'd be happy to respond to the question, because in the vaping space, I think that the clear message is that we are being very strong, and that's why we are trying to push the momentum. And as I've repeatedly said, we want to increase penalties. We want to increase enforcement, which is being done now, and that putting tighter regulations and more enforcement, in terms of penalties, clarifying this is actually doing exactly what we're trying to achieve, which is, from a credibility point of view, is delivering what we committed to do at the beginning of the year and what Cabinet has signed off on doing.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you.
Okay,
I think someone needs to sit down there and learn how to sit down there and have their camera. Otherwise, I might just talk like this all night long. Thank you, former journalist Ingrid Leary, for giving this as a good example of how to sit there and not do things when you're on camera.
Yeah. Just imagine being interviewed by her. She'd be like staring into your soul.
Now, we do have this. does select committee powers have any purpose? What's the purpose of them? So the point of bills going to select committee is so that the public can put their submissions. They make sure they do not, say, in theory, break another law, and it's meant to iron out a lot of the parts of the of laws to make sure that they're good quality laws. Now, truncated select committee processes probably don't help, as I recently, as a business owner, so I sell a banana maple waffle delight at my coffee cart, and it says 3 waffle trees. Was it grilled banana and whipped coconut cream on top? Now, you can't buy whipped aerosol coconut cream cans in New Zealand. So all I've got to do is buy an 8.5 gram, cream charger, which is full of nitrous oxide that fluffs up the cream. Recently, there was a bill, recently there was some regulation changes that have come through that has made it virtually impossible to buy those cream chargers. Now, the frustrating thing about being in New Zealand is the fact that in order to have whipped coconut cream, this is the only way you can do it.
Yep.
Now, I have managed to get to Bidfood and buy them from Bidfood rather than the places I normally buy them through in Auckland. So, okay, I've got somewhere, but that was a frustrating part. Now, the select committee process is meant to iron out ridiculous things like this. And for all those wondering, I have emailed my local MP, Julian Genta, on the issue.
Right, we've got to get you some whipped coconut. So I looked at the bill, and under Section 40, basically penalties if you sell stuff to under 18-year-olds. The penalty can go from 10,000 to 100,000. It's been increased to 100,000. So basically, the minimum fine is 10,000. The maximum fine is 100,000.
Yeah, and for STA on there, if the bill's under urgency, you can skip the select committee process.
Yeah.
Shall we continue on the next questioning? Was it the Honourable Casey Costello?
Thank you, Minister. So we've got a few hands up, so just so everyone knows where they stand. We've got Puhana up next, followed by Carlos, followed by Tracy, followed by Jennifer. Puhana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Minister. I'm just wanting to explore and following up with what my colleague Ingrid has shared in terms of consultation and engagement and the short runway that the people of New Zealand have had to provide submissions into this space. It is reported that there was no consultation with Tiwi Māori nor with the Māori health sector. Can you please explain why there was a failure to engage even with the Māori health sector on this legislation?
I think the important part is that we have, from a broader perspective, engaged quite strongly.
Māori are like the biggest
myself met with the frontline quit smoking service providers. Large majority of those are Māori service providers, so I think there has been good engagement around the stuff we're trying to achieve. But I think to get back, yes, there's a lot of work in the broader smoking space, absolutely agree. But this piece of legislation, which has been part of an ongoing program of work around targeting vaping and youth vaping specifically, this is, again, getting back to the smaller scope of this work is to ensure that we are doing immediate actions to tighten up vaping. But further work around the whole regime and around the controls of tobacco and tobacco-related products and vaping will continue, and that consultation will be a huge part of that program of work. But this really is about getting some tighter controls and stronger penalties in place, sending a very clear message that we do not want our young people vaping. That it is a useful tool for cessation of smoking, but we do not want our young people vaping, and I think the sooner we can get this strong legislation forward, I think the better. But in terms of further consultation, we will continue to do that under the broader program of work.
Minister, and supplementary again, Mr. Chair. So who's aside, it's an expectation that as the Minister you would meet with the sector on a regular basis to test and also to consult on what you're up to. But notably with this legislation, there has been no engagement with Te Iwi Māori, where the Te Tiriti relationship sits, nor with the Māori health sector in terms of this legislation. Now, considering, the impact that smoking and vaping disproportionately has on Tiwi Māori, let alone youth smoking trends for Māori young people, Do you not think that it should have been a priority rather than just talking to Te Arawhiti or Te Puni Kōkiri, that you could have called a couple of hui or even reached out to Pou Tangata and National Iwi Chairs just as to let them know that it's coming?
I think again that this consultation process is an important part of all the decisions making, but this isn't an isolated, this program of work has been ongoing for quite some time, and there has been broad consultation across the board around vaping generally. This small piece of work that relates to increasing penalties, the proximity considerations, and the targeting of the youth vaping sector in terms of the types of products available. We were very cognizant of ensuring that the types of products that have allowed it's over 79,000 Māori to quit over the last 3 years was continued to be provided, and that's been an important consideration in this process. But this is specifically around targeting youth vaping, and I think that there was sufficient knowledge within the sector and within the ministry around what was important in this program of work, which is reducing youth vaping.
And I appreciate you've made assumptions in terms of enough consultation with the sector or with Tiwi Māori, but I would reaffirm the fact that as Māori, we would like to hear from the Minister on legislation that does impact our people. And in closing, Mr. Chair, interested to understand whether there was any engagement with local government on this legislation and the teeth that they need to use in their own legislation through bylaws in terms of the location, vicinity of vape stores in their local communities.
I would talk in terms of the local councils, and I personally met with some of the mayors around the country around the issues and that was really discussing the future environment. Remember, this regulatory regime is the decisions are made by the Director General of Health. They're not sitting with council at the moment. They are aware of those issues, and they do want further involvement from the feedback I've had. They do want further involvement about where these stores are, and that's that next piece of work that I've been talking about around the regulatory regime and where those authorities should sit and who would be the decision makers in that process. But again, not in the scope of this bill.
And so, as
we're through here, Hannah. Sorry,
okay, Mr. Chair.
we're going to.
Now, I've got some data here from Smokefree New Zealand. So in 2022 and 2023, and hi Matthew, I finally get to take this beard off.
Why have you got a beard on?
Okay, right. So there's been a decline in smoking with Māori. So that's the good news. Under the Labour government, it went from 33.7% down to 17.1%. I don't know what Casey Costello's plan is going to result in, but it looks like it's on a downward trajectory. And that's for all ethnic groups.
Welcome.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm running late. I'd like to lie and tell you that there was something so fantastical that I'd just be lying. About 12 months ago, one of the issues I had was a stroke, and so I get fatigued really easily. And so I was out this afternoon at another nefarious enterprise, and I got home and I shut my eyes and I literally just woke up again. So my apologies. I'd like to lie and tell you it was something so cool, but nah, I'm just old.
Well, as I say, welcome to the Order Paper. You seem to be getting on all the shows this week. Everyone seems to be getting you. I assume tomorrow you're on TVNZ Breakfast. You'll be on 7 sharp tomorrow night.
Well, I'm one for being on TVNZ with my dodgy as CB. Sorry, I'm in one of those moods because I'm just listening to Casey Costello, and I reason this. If there was an independent commission against corruption in New Zealand like there is in Queensland and New South Wales and other states of Australia, Ms. Costello would no longer be a minister. She would have been stood down some time ago. She would have been independently investigated, and a lot of time would have been focused on her connections to the very industry in which she claims she has no connection with.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the main point here, guys. I think the main point is that at the end of the day, yes, Paul, I did do too much karaoke last night. At the end of the day, what we have here is a classic example of somebody who should never have been elected to Parliament, and it's an embarrassment to democracy. Because at the other end of the pipe, when there's a health issue, as a very former senior health official, I can tell you it is hard tracing that very large percentile of people who are hardened smokers. There's a lot of work involved, a lot of effort, and Ms. Costello just talking about heated tobacco products as if somehow, or HTP somehow, as if it's, don't look here, look over there, don't look here, look over there, is incredible. And this is where I think you've got a problem more generally with the coalition government and two members of cabinet from the coalition partners in terms of Nicole McKee with her ties to the gun lobby and Casey Costello and her ties to the tobacco industry. And if not her ties, because this is what they do, they like to smooth talk their way out of it by saying, oh yeah, but I don't have any direct contacts. Prove it. No, but your mates do. And that's why an independent commission against corruption would unpack all of that stuff. I'm not too sure that organisations or entities like parliamentary services, for example, or even, God forbid, the waste of time select committee process in this country would be able to uncover all of this sort of stuff. The second part, sorry, I'm on a rant.
Yeah, keep going, keep cooking.
The second part of this that I find equally as disturbing is that when you have a look at the powers of the ombudsman and others to investigate or inquire, we don't get to find out until sometime later what possibly could have happened. And then you throw in the Auditor General's office, I think it's John Grant or whatever his name is, and you finally get a sense that there is something quite untoward going on. Always was, always has been. And then you get the National Party as centre of the coalition and Luxon. So yeah, but we're just implementing the coalition agreement. I don't know what you're all talking about. We're just implementing the coalition agreement. It's the coalition agreement. I wish Luxon would spend as much time honouring the Tiriti of Waitangi that we've been asking him to do, or asking New Zealanders to do for many years. But no, old mate from middle management has now stepped in and said, oh, I'm just honouring the coalition agreement as if it's a joint venture agreement in New Zealand business. It's just ridiculous. If I was to sum it up, I would suggest to you that there is a circus in town looking for its clowns, and sadly, the rest of us have got to put up with the fact that they're not very good clowns.
I do know where there is a ringmaster, but I think she's a bit better than trying to sit there and deal with clowns known as Councillor Mandy Mayhem Bollock of the Dunedin City Council.
Oh God!
I've got some funny stuff here about Casey. This is straight from RNZ. In December 2023, Associate Health Minister Casey Costello gave health officials the document which claimed nicotine is as harmful as caffeine, and argued Labour's smoke-free generation policy was a nanny state's nonsense. Earlier this year, Costello denied the document existed. Now she has released it with parts redacted, even though she says she does not know who wrote it.
God, that is an awkward thing. That's not far off from saying my dog ate my homework.
Well, sadly, I've debated Miss Costello when she was with Hobson's Bleach several years ago on the program Te Awa with Moana Mariapato. And I can tell you it wasn't a debate. It was one-liners, it was terrible, and this is exactly what Costello does and her ilk. What they do is they attempt to, like I said before, don't look here, look over there, shiny new toy over in the corner somewhere. The truth is that they make rubbish statements. I mean, in that example with the research that was finally released around heated tobacco products, and I think it was TVNZ that did this, they poked holes all over it. And sorry, in the absence of an independent commission against corruption, sadly, the media in Aotearoa, New Zealand, they don't have the ability or the means to do good quality investigative journalism, which also probably would have uncovered this, because we're so focused on the content production aspect of news. I'll give you an example. If you were ever to find yourself on Four Quarters in Australia, Frontline in the United States, or BBC Panorama, you're in trouble. If this lot found themselves on either one of those three programs, they think they were about to win the Nobel Peace Prize or something. That's how flippant the whole thing is. Sorry, that's my second rant over.
It's all right. Let's see how more questions go to the minister.
It'll be quite tight on this too, because I see Cam's also got his hand up. So one primary, two subs, and so thank you on that one, Carlos.
Good morning, Minister. I I just want to go back to the legislation. It's good to see that there's a restriction on the vape shop being open within a school distance. But can you give us more information why there is a difference between the school and the early childhood education center? Because we can see that vape shop can't open within 300 meters of a school, but only 100 meters of an early childhood education center. Can you give us a little bit more information why you make such a decision?
Yeah, I think that was, and I think there has been information sent to committee from health regarding those positions. It was largely to do with a huge number of ECEs, and that when you worked out the percentage, I think if the ECE weren't included, if we were just still sticking with the schools and marae around proximity, I think we would end up with about 50% reduction. I think the broader with ECE, if we introduced it at 300 metre, because I think there's about 4,000 ECEs, it would have created much broader impact. But again, I'm very open to the select committee's responses around that proximity rule and what would be the most important consideration around that. This was again responding to a lot of public concern around the proximities, not including ECEs, but recognising there was a much higher number of ECEs. So that was where the difference was. So in terms of changing to the 100. But again, that very open to what the select committee responds in regard to that decision around the proximity rules. Noting that this isn't retrospective, so it wouldn't remove the current licensed SVRs that are already trading. It wouldn't be retrospectively applied. So again, all of these proximity rules would be part of that future work around whether we've got this regulatory settings right in the future.
Yes, supplementary. Just as you say that this is the first legislation targeting vaping, are we going to have a second stage? Are we targeting the opening hour of the vape shops?
Yeah, and this is, I think the broader program of work which I've been talking about is the whole regulatory regime, and there's a broader program of work around the consistency around the controls put on tobacco and vaping and all of those considerations. So everything would be within that scope of work around whether we've got all these settings right and ensuring we've got fit for purpose legislation moving forward.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, parents of young children have got to get their vapes. It's very stressful.
Yeah, I must admit, I have been in front of select committees myself as the chairman of a ministry of a government agency, and the one thing I've learned is always sit down and critique your performance after you have appeared. It's insightful, and the lady in the blue on the couch behind her with her face buried in her hands,
yes,
pretty much says it all. And that was Carlos Chung, the local new member from Mount Roskill, unlikely to probably survive the next election if the Left or Labor are able to win the seat of Mount Roskill back. That they quite frankly should never have lost, like New Lynn in the last election.
Auntie Gwen has lived in Newland for in the same street for over 70 years, and she said to me, this is a week before the election, when I visited her, my pay vote's the only thing that's going to count. It's been a safe seat. I mean, Jonathan Hunt was my MP for how long?
Yeah,
since my kids were like in primary school, and I actually haven't spoken to her, but I think she would have been shocked on election night.
Yeah, I think, look, there's been a demographic, demographic? Oh, I'm not going to pronounce it. A demographic shift in the population in Auckland for a while. I think the population is about to reach 2 million by 2035 or something like that. The suburbs that you once could have relied on as working class suburbs like Mount Roskill, New Lynn, hell, even back in the day, Greyland. And where I live in Point Chevalier, within the electorate, I think it is of Mount Albert. You could have relied on those seats to always vote left. But in the demographic change, what you've got is you've got mortgage holders, you've got the middle class and that sort of thing, and they're not necessarily loyal voters. They've become swing voters. But anyway, coming back to the performance I was going to talk about. What you've also got in the body of the minister's response are obvious one-liners. And when you've got what was Sam Effendale, the chair of that select committee from Tauranga, I mean, I hate to say it, when you've got people who don't understand what the select committee process is all about, you soon are able to poke holes in the process of a select committee. It's not like the Senate in Australia or having an old upper house. In fact, they had to write to Winston Peters the other day and remind him, actually, no, you were wrong. The upper house in New Zealand that was abolished in the 1950s, which was a house of review, was not an elected body as such. It was a carve-up between the major parties. But it did its job. It was there to interrogate legislation. It was there to amend legislation and all
It
that
was
sort of
meant
thing.
to be there to try and stop women having the right to vote.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was I mean, you know, the crazy thing is it wasn't that long ago that we had an upper house. But coming back to the point I guess I'm trying to make after a very long rant, this is around now rant number 3, which is simply about this, Sam. The process, the select committee has been hijacked for purposes not intended by other people. And where I'm going with all of this as well is that, maybe instead of putting out stupid debates like Te Tiri Te Waitangi, which are a complete waste of taxpayers' money and cause division, they might want to clean up their own house before they ask the rest of us to clean ours in the front yard. Is I guess my point. This business though of the one-liners, there's something that Costello says in that select committee hearing that indicates to me that she doesn't necessarily, she's not interested in consultation, number one, and number two, she's at the end of the day, while she's in Parliament and they've got this coalition agreement that Luxon has to honour, she'll pretty much do whatever the hell she wants.
I haven't met anyone from Hobson's Pledge that likes to consult other people.
No.
It seems to be a trend.
Yeah, I mean, I've met quite a few people from Hobson's Pledge. I mean, I've sat down with Don Brash on the odd occasion. And, you know...
You survived.
Yeah, he's survived. I've been very nice, mainly because I didn't want to hurt Koro.
Yeah, well,
you know...
okay, he survived.
Yeah. But you know, I guess the final point I'm trying to make though is that the way that this is unfolded, particularly around heated tobacco products, sadly, and this is what they do, they wear the New Zealand public down. Yep. And they wear them down to the point that the New Zealand public just begin to switch off. And so while they're getting on with the nefarious enterprise, the New Zealand public, while interested and caring and want to do something about it, they're also sick and tired of hearing about it.
Yeah. Let's see the next question.
All of those sort of considerations were part of the discussions that we've had, and I think that's that next point that we're talking about is ensuring that we have a fit beyond, just the infringement notice and the longer term prosecution process that exists. And that was really the reference that was included in there was about that future state and what we need to be considering.
So we should be able to rest assured that advice, previous advice, is going to be heeded, and that there will be moves in that direction. I'm just wondering also how that relates the cuts to the National Public Health Service announcement today. What sort of assurances have you been given, or what information are you aware of that leads you to believe, or therefore leads us to believe as a committee and as a society, that those cuts won't have any impact on that enforcement regime when it is put in place and when those decisions are taken?
Yeah, I think that it was an important question. It was something I asked specifically of the Ministry a few weeks ago. This is a significant priority for health overall. The smoking is a significant priority. I have been given full assurance that the enforcement team, as we've targeted, I think it's to be 16 by the end of the year, is protected and there was no issues. So that those are the assurances I've asked for and been given.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add
Thank you very much, Tracy.
there? I just want to add one interesting thing you'll all notice during the select committee process is and it's sad she wasn't actually sitting in the select committee room because you would have seen the officials from the Ministry of Health sitting behind her, is the constant suggestion that, oh yeah, no, it's the Ministry of Health's problem, or it's the government department's issue, or they gave me this advice, or they give me that. There is now an overwhelming abundance of evidence that indicate through the release of official documents and cabinet papers that that's not the case at all. Sorry, and the second thing that goes to this issue of the select committee process and the wanton use of the refer back to the officials is that unless I'm wrong, the amount of information that would be proactively released through the cabinet process is a lot slimmer in the official folder, if you like, than the previous government.
Yeah. Let's see what more comes out of Miss Costello.
And Minister. Okay, that takes us to Jenny Marcroft.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today, Minister. My question to you is, going back to the formation of this piece of legislation, what were the issues that you identified from the previous regime regarding the types of vaping products which led you to make the changes that you're making today?
I think the big challenge that we've had and was recognised was that we've had progressive tweaks and adjustments regarding the types of products that we're using, and it takes a bit of time for the industry to respond, and those sort of things that we're creating a bit of a lack of clarity. And I think we just needed to be a lot simpler and a lot stronger around what products were in and what products were out, so that moving forward both enforcement is clarified, but also that we have a very strong position around the types of products that young people have access to, and we want to make sure that we've got a very strong line around making sure that the product as a cessation tool remains available as it's been useful for those quitting smoking, but ensuring that the legislation was clear around it, that we weren't going to end up with further tweaks to the process, that we had a very strong position, and that's very keen to hear the Select Committee's report back on what that final solution will be.
And just to follow up to that, thanks, Mr. Chair, what impacts are you anticipating around the product changes?
Well, I think the strong thing is to get the product that is most attractive to young people off the market, and that's really simplifying what's available on the market, ensuring that we can make enforcement a lot clearer and simpler.
Which products?
I think that's the real target, is to get the most used products that young people are using off the market, and ensuring we have tight controls over what can be sold, and particularly a penalty regime that is a much stronger deterrent. So that as the enforcement ramps up, we can be sure that we're holding those accountable for breaching those regulations.
Yeah, she doesn't specify which products.
That's full of shit. That's full of shit. So we now know that the enforcement regime is not an enforcement regime as such, because neither the Minister nor I think it was the Prime Minister were aware that heated tobacco products that were enforceable were still being sold to people that it shouldn't have been sold to. So the first thing is she's completely not on top of her portfolio, but that doesn't matter, because in the Patsy question from her colleague from New Zealand First, Jenny Marcroft.
No. On Zoom it says she was called Jennifer.
Okay. That changes everything.
And my apologies to the man in blue, I think, on the couch sitting behind here. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody, although I believe that New Zealand First, because I can't believe that they were Ministry of Health officials sitting behind her in her office. They must be within her own.
You're going to have someone there to throw under the bus. She's probably the door.
Yeah, let's throw the blue jacket guy under.
Yeah, we'll just throw him under the bus.
But the first thing is the double narrative of this government, which is we're cleaning up the mess of the previous government, because they were only ever doing things in piecemeal and in stages.
And not to mention that the Smokefree data said that under Labour, smoking was already going down for all ethnic groups.
Yeah.
So what mess are you cleaning up?
Well, that's right. And then the other narrative is that is simply the cost of it all.
Yeah.
And we're here to clean up Labour's big mess from the last. Well, I hate to say it, but I mean, I'm old enough to recall the Kirk government coming in 74, I think it was, and having to clean up a mess, or the Longy government in 84 having to clean up a whoever mess. So this narrative, and this is the conditioning thing I mentioned in the last rant, which is the New Zealand public have also become conditioned to now not believe National when they say we're better at managing the economy than the last lot. So I think what's interesting is that this whole process over heated tobacco products. Let's be really clear here. Not only is she full of shit and doesn't have the evidence to back it up, independent of her little mates in the tobacco industry.
That's right.
And that's just calling it like it is.
She hasn't cited any studies or anything like that.
I can certainly say this. I get people who come up to me and go, "So you voted National at last election?" I go, "No, I didn't. I gave my electoral vote to Julian Genter because she had the better shot to win against the Labour candidate, and I gave my party vote to Top, and that throws people completely off." And I said, "I've got no interest in voting National. They say they can run a business, but when they sit there and keep showing me the things that are in there, they're the quicker way to sit there and crash a business from what they've described." And this is before this current lot started doing what they were doing.
I was going to say, they know how to run a business from the ground.
people like me, who see through the bullshit, right?
Well, see, and this is the issue that you've got, team. And dealing in evidence is not something that this lot are necessarily familiar with. Even when the evidence doesn't back up what you. Well, I mean, actually, you don't go out in public and talk about shit if you don't have the evidence to back it up, and that's the important lesson here. And you certainly don't leave a paper trail behind you that looks like you're in Red Riding Hood. I think it is. Well, no, what are those two kids that went to the gingerbread house?
Yeah, Hansel and Gretel.
Hansel and Gretel. There you go. Hansel and Gretel. Drop the breadcrumbs to get yourself.
It's a shame we don't have SNL, because SNL could do an excellent good clip about Hansel and Gretel and make Casey Costello the smoking gingerbread tobacco house.
But I think
she can be the witch in the story.
But I think, Sam, you raised a really important point about the people having voted for Julian Genter or Top or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not for a moment suggesting that people only vote homogeneously, if that's even a word, because we stopped doing that for a long time. Māori, for example, are not a single homogenous voting group. We don't all vote for Te Pāti Māori. We don't all vote for Labour. Sadly, some of us vote for either National or New Zealand First. Some vote for the Greens. Some vote for ACT.
There were some very good Māori candidates. The one in Tamaki Makaurau, who's standing for National, I think would have made a brilliant MP. Was it Hinarera Tihawa?
Yeah, Hinarera. I know Hinarera really well. She's smart, academically inclined, and intelligent. The problem that National have with people like that is that they're too smart for their own good.
Yeah.
And so, is that a tail? my dog's causing havoc down the other end of the house.
It is a tail indeed.
I've got a Shiba Inu, a little puppy, a Japanese hunting dog called Hana-chan. Hana is the Japanese word for flower, and chan being the Japanese word for girl. And she's just had her operation, and at first I thought the cone of shame was hilarious, but it wore off pretty quickly, completely off topic. But what I'm trying to say, Sam, is that, the other thing that's gone on, sadly, is with the younger vote, the rangatahi vote, youth vote. And that is that these days, whereas they may not have turned out to vote because they were disenfranchised or disconnected from the system, somehow a large number of them thinking that liking a Facebook post is akin to walking into the voting booth and casting a ballot. And the problem with that is the growth of both influencers and what we now call content creators and all these sorts of things who themselves by their very nature are not loyal. I mean, once the TikTok trend is over and another platform emerges, they'll go to that one. And so it is actually quite hard for people like us or me to keep up voting trends as we could do in the olden days. But, again, I come back to the point, it would be useful to have these sorts of discussions about our future arrangements, what does a constitution look like, and all of these different things, than waste nearly $4 million. By the way, it wasn't going to cost anything on a select committee process on the treaty principles bill, because old mate from old Epsom, who did a dodgy deal with National and Paul Goldsmith, but not really, don't look here, has this vendetta. Who can somebody please tell me who was mean to David Seymour at school?
I don't know. Someone must have thrown him to the locker really hard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't advocate people watching The Vampire Diaries like I've got a sad life. But it's like he's in some rom-com teenage series from Netflix on vampires, werewolves, or vagabonds.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Sorry.
I've had this said to me at 2-part kindergarten where more than half the staff are Māori, and they go like, who stole his lunch at school? They're the kindergarten that has said, if David Seymour turns up, the red carpet gets rolled up and put away in the office.
Yeah, David, I don't think was offered doughboys at lunchtime.
No.
I think David is miffed that he wasn't offered the doughboys. I reckon he was miffed that he didn't get a decent pork bone from the pot. and didn't like it anyway, and was grated at the fact that there was no sushi on offer.
Let's see, going from a Luxton to a Luxton, as people keep mentioning in there. Let's see what Cameron Luxton's got. What questions he will ask.
All right. So the question I've got is around the visibility restrictions for vaping products. What are you trying to achieve by imposing retail visibility restrictions?
I think that the strongest part is that when we talk to those advocating for prevention of youth, when you look at the types of youth vaping stores, the way they're set up, the colours, the way they're marketed. So similarly to the process we did with tobacco being able to be displayed and shown, it's that making sure that we aren't allowing a marketing regime that is clearly targeting children. And I think we can all name the shop that is, and particularly in poor socioeconomic areas, that the vaping shop is always the flashiest, most colourful and brightly attractive. And I think it would be naive to suggest that's not being targeted at young people. In terms of, and this is why the guidelines that can be set for regulation, retailers around how you display and how you make sure that they're not set up to attract young people will be, I think further guidelines can be developed around that. We're not suggesting that stores are blacked out and behind solid doors, but it's just the way the products are displayed, and there'll be some flexibility around that. And that was the objective, and it really is responding to a lot of the feedback around those concerned about young people vaping is the way the stores have been set up.
So the committee heard from the ministry that the justification for having a proximity regime around ECEs was to limit the exposure of children, specifically siblings of kids attending ECEs, because it was agreed that probably under 7-year-olds aren't picking up vaping. So to keep the siblings away, and the idea was to limit the exposure. So I'm just wondering, do we need both of these, a restriction on the visibility and also the restriction on a geographic restriction around ECEs?
I mean, my feeling, this is really, where the submission process and select committee report back will be of use. But when you consider that we have a lot of large shopping malls that do not have, that don't fall within those proximity restrictions, but clearly have a huge number of young people gathering and circulating and going past, I think that it does recognise that you do need both, because those stores that are outside of the proximity restrictions, but still have a large number of young people gathering and shopping, and I think we can all name a major shopping mall that would fit within that criteria.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great, thank you, Cam. I've just got one quick question, and I see Hamish has got his hand up as well, and it was around some of the feedback we'd heard from people in our briefing into vaping, which is around the flavours offered to youth and whether there was any desire to limit the range of flavours available. We have heard some people suggesting that limiting it to tobacco and menthol flavour vapes would be quite good to get the kids away from coconut ice or bubbles, gum, grape, or whatever it is that they do. I'm just wondering whether any consideration was given to that.
Yeah, there is a program. I'll just check with officials, because I think there was some restrictions put in place on flavours. On the naming of flavours, yeah, there was. Yeah, it's not included.
I didn't write anything about flavours
on the naming of, but again, all of those that sort of the regime moving forward around how we control this and make sure we're not presenting a product that's attractive to young people. And I would strongly suggest that our hardcore addicted smokers aren't going to pick up watermelon ice sort of flavours anyway. So I think there is a real opportunity.
Not in the bill.
A piece of work.
Okay, great.
No mention of flavours.
Interesting. I hadn't realised the officials were actually in the room, but off camera and completely embarrassed to show their faces. Look, here's the thing. I mean, would you have a peaches and cream open up next to an ECE? No, you wouldn't. Would you allow a TAB with sports betting screens and a bar outside in modern day New Zealand open up next door to an ECE? No, you wouldn't. And again, classic old, but shopping centres and kids loiter is what you were saying in shopping centres. So what's the big deal here? Number one, we're talking about products that by their very nature can inhibit the respiratory growth and system of young people. We know this through the Asthma and Respiratory Foundation research that they have put out and referred to often. A couple of, I think just over a year ago, were the cases in places like the United States that indicated young people we're suffering from respiratory illnesses never seen before, and vaping was a big issue. We've had evidence plenty about the attraction of flavorful products.
Yes, I've got a study on that on hand.
I mean,
yep.
We could probably just within the body of the next 10 minutes, and your viewers could rustle up the research that is still independent of the tobacco industry.
Oh, yeah, I've got peer-reviewed research here that's not funded by the tobacco industry.
No,
yeah.
And so just on that, the funding of the tobacco industry, we now have a vaping industry. We should call it what it is, a vaping industry. Philip Morris and other tobacco companies are often the largest shareholders or investors in these companies. And again, I come back to a much earlier point where this would have been information that would have been picked up by really pretty decent and solid investigative journalism, or alternatively by an opposition who's still struggling to find their identity, having been whacked out of the last election. And by God, Labor needs to get their act together if they want to form government again. God, Sam Eefendale, wow. Who would have thought that old Sam would have been the chair of a select committee? And
I think it was a token role to try and keep him in there, but keep him away from the ministerial aspect.
Well, it's like James Meagher, isn't it? And Dan Bidwar. I mean, you won't see those two boys in a hurry unless the killing season starts at midday on November 15th. For a cabinet reshuffle, and Penny Simmons is out the door, having performed so incredibly well in her portfolio with tertiary education.
Zulu Kilo Papa India Golf is going to be landing at Wellington Airport soon. Okay, now here's one that I would like to sit there and see. Come on.
I just dropped a link for the study that I was referring to. Flavors increase adolescents' willingness to try nicotine and cannabis vape products. If anyone's interested in reading that.
No, thank you for that. And yep, that will sit down there and get its way around. Now, here's one where I'm just trying. Now, what is the time? Okay.
But while you're doing that, Sam, I guess the point I try and keep on reinforcing is that, look, the select committee process can work if we allow it to work. And the select committee process allows us to participate in democracy, not be excluded from it. It's meant to be a non-invasive opportunity to perfect the very legislation that needs to be amended or perfected. And it's something David Seymour likes to refer to as well, that in this process of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I'm sorry to keep on mentioning this, but the thing that it keeps on going on about is that lawmakers and all the rest of it have held sway over us for so long, and now we know better and we're going to fix it all. Well, actually, the reason that the judiciary, as an example, that it sounds to me they want to usurp now, has such a role in our democracy, is that laws that are made by the Parliament can be tested in the highest court of our land. And often that legislation can be found wanting. The High Court, or the Supreme Court, or whatever they are, will make a determination, and that decision goes back. And what happens is it either forces the government to act on the advice of our learned judicial officers, or alternatively, they amend the legislation accordingly. What's happened in this case, in this coalition government, within the space of only less than 12 months, is that we're not going to follow that process, that convention of democracy that we inherited from the Westminster system. No, because we know better. We know better because our legislation and everything is so perfect. What are you all moaning about? I mean, my God, we've all got your best interests at heart. No, you've got the tobacco lobby at heart. You've got the vaping industry at heart. You've got your mates in the big end of town business at heart. And now comes the news that, of course, Seymour wants to allow it easier for people to invest in New Zealand and buy New Zealand land and all the rest of it. I mean, what are we going to see? Round two of an asset sale process that didn't work the last time around. There you go, rant over.
Okay, so we'll get to another
I
submission.
feel like I say the same thing every 10 minutes, and I do actually, but it's good everyone has that introduction. So you have 10 minutes. You may use it as you wish. If you want to give us time at the end for questions, you may do so. Thank you, Angela.
Kia ora tātou, thank you so much for the welcome. Ko Angela McLeod aho. I thank you very much for accommodating us today. I just wanted to quickly add that we support the Cancer Society's oral submission and given earlier, and also the ASH research that you've most likely got in your papers. In addition to our written submission, I would also like to say that we would like to see the government uphold their, and as a state party, our obligation to the World Health Organisation's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, particularly around Article 5.3, which requires governments to interact with tobacco companies only as required for regulatory purposes, and states that all interactions must be documented and transparent, and an obligation that's also acknowledged on the Ministry of Health website. It's obvious to us because the evidence and the language being used suggests that the tobacco industry have been quite successful in lobbying the government, and we need to see transparency around that. I'd also like to point out too that the impact on local government and their regulation should not be underestimated. How will this legislation impact them? Do they have the resources, both human and financial, to carry out any control imposed on them by this legislation? We'd also like to see kindness to those who vape because they have a nicotine dependence. Let's not call them addicts. Let's see what it is. If they've moved from cigarettes to vaping, how will this legislation support them? How will this legislation ensure there's a vaping cessation program in place for them? And will the language change ensure they're not labelled addicts? I mean, has anyone died from vaping in New Zealand? We don't want this to happen, of course. But will punishing the users work instead of actually punishing the pushers and the sellers? And why are we not having the same conversations about alcohol? Smoking kills 2 in every 3 users, we know that. However, and I know it's not the mandate of this committee at this stage talking about this legislation to think about alcohol, but there needs to be some equity of discussion around addiction.
Yeah, can I just jump in there, Angela, very quickly? You made an assertion earlier that this government has been lobbied and successfully lobbied by tobacco companies, and you can't really make those sort of assertions. And the minister has quite clearly stated in the House several times that isn't the case. Also, 2 out of 3 users of alcohol, did you say they die?
No, smoking.
Smoking, 2 out of 3. Okay, cool, good, thank you.
So yes, we'd like to see some equity of discussion around addictions. The regulation and punishment of suppliers, I mean, we heard from earlier too, is how will the impact of the black market, see, it hasn't worked in Australia and there's been an increase in the black market, so how will this legislation deal with that? Is there an adverse effect on women, and what will the government be doing about that, because it's an obligation under CEDAW after all. Am I able to answer the statement around I just wanted to be clear around my statement earlier was that the language being used by both the government and the tobacco lobby is the same. So that, I guess, is where many members of the public are making that assertion, Chair.
Noted. Thank you, Angela.
So, how does it feel to have friend of the show and guest host of It's on the Ballot Women's Suffrage Day special, Angela McLeod from good old Upper Hutt?
You know, Angela's my whanaunga, my cousin.
Okay.
Well, not directly, but her mum is the partner of my Uncle Peter O'Flaherty there in Upper Hutt. And I've known Angela, obviously, for a very long time. I thought that part was an embarrassment. Sam Uppendale to interrupt a submitter and attempt to correct the record of the government.
Also, the submitter
no, I haven't been lobbied.
Former parliamentary EA.
Oh yeah, I mean Angela knows her stuff. She's just messaged me. I sent her a screenshot of the thing we've just been watching. You know, the interesting thing is that she knows her stuff. Number 2, though, she wasn't necessarily being combative. She was saying, she was making a really important point that, you know what, we shouldn't label the addicted as an example, because, you know, no one thankfully has yet died of vaping of an illness here in New Zealand. Maybe that's because it hasn't been categorised appropriately, or we haven't seen a coronial inquiry so far in that a death was questionable or referred to the coroner by somebody. But anyway, to me. So, you know, God, Sam, well, the select committee process isn't designed, brother, for you to be asking Patsy questions like you get a Patsy question to asking question time to the old light bulb moment. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
And I'll be honest, my only big experience is dealing with the Justice Select Committee in more recent times, and I can tell you right now, they've never asked me Patsy questions.
No,
or questions to sit there and try to rip you a new one that could backfire.
All I gotta say is that he seemed really triggered by the idea of being lobbied.
Yeah.
That's when he jumped in and interrupted her.
Oh, well, let's see what questions get asked for, Ange.
So, kia ora, I have finished. I'm open for questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your submission there. Huhana Linden has her hand up. Huhana.
Kia ora, Angela, and thank you very much to the network for providing your submission today. But also recognise, you represent a group of mamas, of mothers and carers for our mokopuna and our future. Now, thinking about, you've got your core purpose in terms of business and advancing a wahine voice in that space. Can you provide for us some guidance? And I've already heard, the fact that you want to see the link between alcohol and tobacco in these matters. And the Cancer Society spoke to that too in terms of the placement of this product. Can you give us some advice on some of these things? Because while this is for a small piece of legislation, there are broader discussions that potentially, as the Health Select Committee, we could examine.
In fact, that question is a very good question, which I could attempt to answer from a personal point of view. I wouldn't be able to represent the BPW voice on that because it is not been discussed in that way, in that context. However, it is an issue. And I work in other, as a lot of us wahine do, I work in a lot of other places apart from just being one of the voices at BPW. So I am a former city councillor. I've been, and I do know that the issues that the dairy group spoke of just before. Absolutely, we need to think about that. We actually need, that's why we mentioned the equity of addiction and all of them having some place. I think that there is not enough work done on that intersectionality between alcohol and smoking and food. The whole alcohol work around having it available in supermarkets at different places, and then you've got like the vaping, and it's just, it'd be a strong suggestion from me that at some stage in the future, if the Select Committee could do some work around that, that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
So, how does
I don't know what happened to Matt. Where did he go?
his camera's turned off, but he's still in there.
I can't see him.
No, I'm still here.
He's still there.
Still here.
Matt, where'd you go?
Spawn off.
Ah, there he is.
We've got more treats.
Shiba Inu.
Hello, Hana-chan. This is the world.
Hana-chan.
So
Konnichiwa.
she's got her operation thing. I'm just going to put it down on the ground.
Aw.
You go, darling. Sorry.
That's all right.
I had to prioritise. I heard some squealing.
Oh, well, I mean, we've now seen the good old fun part there. So, yes, Angela has been asked more questions and from Huhana Linden. And basically, she mentioned not just her own role of her submission, but also the fact that she's a former councillor. So it is definitely, she has mentioned a fair bit in there.
Angela, in her role with BPW Business and Professional Women International, she's been with that organisation for many years. She wasn't quite successful at the last Upper City elections when she attempted to take old Wayne Guppy on. He's been there, I think, about the same length of time as Rex Curtin was when he was mayor, or thereabouts. Her husband, Mac, owns a motorbike shop just over the road from the railway station there. So she's got a really rounded out sort of background, and so the things that she says, I haven't done anything. Oh, so that was Andrew just messaging me as well. The things she says comes from a very different perspective than say your Sam Upendale from Central Consulting Casting.
Yes. No.
I'm sorry. The other reason I heard squealing is it's raining badly up here in Auckland, and so my poor little puppy who's just had her operation is in need of attention because I've been snoring the roof off for the last 4 hours.
Do we want to comment on this?
Well,
We're
the
talking
other
about-
question that could come out of there is what's going to stop people making their own vape products?
Yeah, so when we're talking about fruity vape products, we're talking about like disposable fruity vape flavors. Again, I'm not a smoker, so I don't know all the lingo, but we're talking about that stuff like disposable fruity flavored vapes for kids. Kids getting their hands on them. If you're over 25 or over the age 18, smoke away. I don't care.
Yeah.
We're entering a very dangerous period with this kaupapa. We're entering a period where we don't know necessarily how it's going to impact children. The evidence tells us it's going to be bad. So what we should be doing is creating a safety blanket to protect both our tamariki and mokopuna. And at the most appropriate time into the future, when things might need to be amended or changed, then let's talk about you start these things with trying to get everything that you possibly can think of in, and then be prepared to amend and change legislation as you go. What we're starting here with is we started with world-class smoking legislation that many other nations around the world have either adopted or amended or taken lessons learned from us.
Yeah.
And we've decided to completely unpack that school of thought because of what? The risk of wanting to... Yeah, it's a terrible thing to think that in a country such as ours, very well known over many, many years and across many political colours, I've tried and tested really good social public health policy, that now we've gone down this path. I mean, what next? The American... I mean,
we might have seatbelts removed from cars at the rate we're going.
Well, and this is for those those narratives. I mean, I simply cannot still believe that we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on potholes, but there we are.
Yeah.
One would have thought that why would you continually driving down the same stretch of road and putting your car over a pothole that you know is going to break it? What point do you think can possibly arrive by that? What, so you can just get angry because you're not tuning into the 6 o'clock news anymore? Or changing speed limits around schools and all this other sort of thing. I mean, we are talking about what I would otherwise call retail politics, where somehow what we're doing is responding to a very small minority of people, but using now things such as social media and other platforms to say that it's a bigger problem than it really is. I mean, potholes, the one big thing that's going to bring our country unpacked? No, it's not. But tolling the Manawatu Gorge sure is bloody well helpful.
That could cost National the seat of Wairarapa.
Well, actually, the stuff that they're doing with Dunedin Hospital will probably cost them the seats potentially of Invercargill and Rangitata. The implosion of the industry down there in Timaru, all of these different things. I mean, people forget that Rangatike came very close to changing from National to Labour at the last of the 2020 election, I think it was.
Rangatike came close. I wouldn't have thought that because that's very, very deep blue.
It was deep blue, but I think Soraya Picky-Mason came close to winning on the night, but didn't quite get it across the line on the specials or whatever it might be.
Oh, okay.
So the reality is that we are dealing with the worst of retail politics, and one of the best operators of retail politics is the Minister for Racing, Winston Peters.
Yeah, I mean, I am a libertarian socialist, so part of the reason why I said smoke away is I'm not. Basically, I'm saying, look, it's you have bodily autonomy as long as you're paying taxes, as long as tax money is going to the healthcare system. I don't have an issue with adults vaping. Now,
here's a submission that I found quite interesting. It's from the One Stop Vape Shop.
Very much, got it.
Amahi.
All right. Next up, we have the One Stop Vape Shop with Nimesh Bhavsar. Please excuse me if I have mispronounced that. Nimesh, brilliant. We have you here. Very good to have you here, Nimesh from One Stop Vape Shop. I'm Sam Uppendale, Chair of the Health Committee. We have members of the committee whose names and faces will be visible to you on your screen. We have you for 10 minutes, so you may use that time to speak the whole time, or you may save us a bit of time for questions at the end, but I will now pass that over to you. Thank you. It appears to have frozen. Ash, we can't hear you either. You're on
No,
mute.
he's got a customer selling to.
Mr. Clark, it looks like Nimesh has dropped off the call. We can move on to the next submitter, which I think is probably the
It's the importance of
appreciate
your
the
co-up for
opportunity.
us. Yeah, so
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We were going to move to Nimesh from One Stop Vape Shop, but he is no longer on the call.
Oh, gee, this guy keeps disappearing.
Quick!
Well,
we need to do a ritual to summon him.
It's hard, Sam, when you're running a vape shop because you've got customers coming in and out, and
you go up and smoke.
Yeah, let's go to the Vaping Industry Association.
Vaping Industry Association of New Zealand. But we will take a break for 10 minutes and we'll see you back here at 2:40. Thank you. We're all back.
Random chit-chat that happens in Parliament. Apparently, you tell the whole world that you're having cups of tea, boiling jugs, putting on seat belts.
So just enough time to boil the kettle, it was. Took bloody ages. Anyway.
Use a couple of swear words.
This, Spano, is what you've got to look forward to in your democracy. The good old boys club, alive and well.
Mr. Clark, do we have a spire there?
Can I just stop me, Sam?
Hello, Jenny.
Oh, Jenny.
Hi. Yes.
Good on you, Jenny.
Good to see you're wearing your seatbelt.
I love Zoom meetings.
There will be a couple of dropout points as I go through the rocks, but I'm here. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. No, it's good. It's we do need to improve rural connectivity, don't we?
Oh,
all right. Thank you.
Good.
All right. Next up, we have the Vaping Industry Association of New Zealand. We have the chair of that association, Jonathan Devery, joining us today. Jonathan, there you are. Good afternoon. It's good to see you again. We have you for 10 minutes, similar to last time. You use the 10 minutes as you may wish. You may leave us some time to ask questions at the end if you so wish to. But I'll hand that time over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, we are disappointed with the lack of consultation with anyone, including industry, prior to the development of this bill. The issues I will go on to talk about could have been ironed out if consultation had occurred. Frustratingly, there's very little in this bill with regards to enforcement, which I believe there is a general consensus amongst the committee and other stakeholders that there's been an absolute lack of enforcement activity within industry today. Unfortunately, we believe this is a real missed opportunity to tackle the youth vaping issue with measures that would have had some real positive impact. I'll touch on some of the key issues with the bill before I hand over to questions for the panel. The bill introduces a ban on disposable vaping products. However, either intentionally or due to poor wording, this ban currently captures both disposable single-use products and reusable closed pod systems. The current bill, as it stands, will remove over 95% of all products in the market, essentially leaving the petrol, grocery and convenience sectors cupboards bare. This would have a catastrophic impact on our falling smoking rates, obliterating all the success we've had to date. If this bill goes unchanged, we're simply handing the nicotine market back to the tobacco companies. The key issue here is the definition of a disposable vaping product in Clause 4 of the bill. To be clear, there are three kinds of vaping products in the market. A disposable or single-use system, the device is thrown out after the liquid has been used up. A closed pod system, which are a reusable system where the pod or cartridge is replaced with another pod or cartridge once the liquid has been used up. The device itself is recharged and reused, similar to an espresso machine where you obviously continue to use your coffee machine, but you replace it with cartridges or pods. And thirdly, there's
Coffee
open
flavoured
tank
vape?
systems, which are devices with a large
Probably.
tank capacity, which is manually refilled with bottled liquid by the user. The second and third type, closed pod systems and open tank systems, are both globally referred to as reusable devices or reusable vaping products. The problem with the definition of a disposable vaping product in Clause 4 of the bill as it stands is that it is overbroad and goes beyond single-use devices. Part A of the definition captures those single-use devices, which we support, as do others. But Part B of the definition captures reusable devices, which are replaceable pod systems or closed pod systems, which we strongly oppose. If Part B is not deleted from Clause 4, the only vaping product that will be able to be sold in New Zealand will be the open tank system, a product that simply does not work for most adults. In responding to questions from the Health Committee on Monday, the Minister said that her objective was to remove from the market the products most attractive to young people. But if you look at the ASH data, which we have reproduced on page 6 of our submission, disposable single-use vaping products are overwhelmingly the most popular vaping product amongst young people, which is why industry has been calling for a ban on these products for years. Open tank systems are the second most popular amongst youth because they're the cheapest. Closed pod systems are the least popular amongst young people, but the most popular amongst adults, and yet this bill will be banning them. So the definition does not achieve the Minister's own stated objective. Additionally, there are a number of adverse consequences which will flow from having only open tank system products available in the market. There are real safety risks. Those being manipulation of the e-liquid or the liquid. You can put additives in there. The children accidentally getting their hands on a large bottle of e-liquid and poisoning themselves. Furthermore, open tank systems are complicated to use and will not be available where tobacco is sold. So people will simply revert back to tobacco. Adults with disabilities or dexterity issues cannot use them. They're complicated. They've got many little bits and components to them. So they'll revert back to tobacco. There's a very real risk if this bill, the wording on disposable vaping products is not changed, that there will be a black market because you're simply abolishing the most popular products in the market and leaving the market with a product that 96% of people don't want to use. So the Ministry of Health raised the same concerns.
Can I just make a point here? And don't let this get lost on you. He keeps on saying that, these things should be banned or these things should be. Well, actually, mate, tell your members to stop selling the shit. Just tell your members to stop selling shit that will harm New Zealanders. But no, this is another narrative of the industry where it's if they have consulted, well, they obviously did consult with your major backers, and so this is an example of the double win for Philip Morris. Either the vaping industry are supported through what they're suggesting, or people are going to return to tobacco. And I cannot believe for the life of me he's introduced the dexterity issue for people with disabilities, and somehow that's going to turn them back to smoking as well. Well, I mean, I have a disability. I mean, I still can't move my left side of my body very well. I find it incredibly hard to open up a shampoo bottle or even a milk bottle or the lid on a sauce bottle. Does that mean, though, that I'm going to stop shampooing my hair once a month, that I'm going to move to, a carton of milk? Well, that's just as hard. Or a tomato sauce bottle with no nozzle? No. It means I'm going to find a way of doing what I need to do to live my life. I
love the analogy of what you've brought up there.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on. I mean, I actually watched his evidence. Because don't forget that in the early days of the vaping industry, if you have a look, God forbid, do not have a look at my Twitter account. I was actively in a daily ward with the vaping industry, saying, "Well, where'd you?" And I kept on going back to them. Well, where'd you get your money from? Where'd you get your money from? No. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about where we get our money from or who our shareholders are. We just want to talk about the stuff that we want to talk about, like now. Dexterity. I mean, who knew that the vaping industry had such a commitment to people living with a disability? Fuck's
well,
sake,
it's probably the same people who have such a commitment to disabled car parks that aren't marked disabled to stop a cycle lane.
my question is like, how many kids are actually drinking the liquid? I've never heard of a kid going to hospital for drinking liquid.
Yeah.
No, neither have I. And again, it's a bit of a furphy. It's that whole PR exercise of show them we care, show them we care. I mean, it's what's that TV program, Mad Men? I mean, I can just imagine them all getting into one of their very corporate little rooms where he was doing his presentation from, all with their perfectly manicured beards and parted hair and all these blokes sitting around like the good old days of gliding on, puffing on a cigarette and sandals, long socks and shorts.
Yeah.
And so, I am being facetious and I am being pretty forthright about this industry because at the end of the day, this is what industry associations do, whether it be the Small Business Association, Federated Farmers, or the Airline Pilots Association, if there even is one.
It's a tricky one because there's a balance between bodily autonomy for adults versus doing what is best for children. It's like, damn, there's so many trade-offs you have to consider here. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the work I used to do in suicide prevention with the Ministry of Health. I would never think to take money, and I would not take money. I wouldn't even be an ethical dilemma for me from pharmaceutical companies, gambling agencies, and bootleggers. And, I think that's the ethical discussion we need to have as a nation. Who are we taking our advice from? What is their involvement in turning a profit or making money? I mean, I think the other big discussion that we yet to have is now the increasing prevalence of sports betting in our nation.
Yeah. Let's hear more what he's got to say and hopefully some questions.
Parliamentary regulatory impact statement disagreeing with the closed pod system ban. Additionally, the Cancer Society, Tala Pacifica, Aotearoa, ASH and Aspire have all raised concerns about the possibility of unintended consequences given the definition of the disposable vaping product is too broad. VAN's view is that Part B of the definition in Clause 4 must be deleted. Closed pod systems absolutely must remain in market. To give context, if you look at the graph on page 2, the top graph on page 2 of our submission, you'll see the sales of vaping units and tobacco through supermarkets and petrol stations. Essentially, none of those units, those vaping product units, are open system units. So that gives you an idea of what happens in the sector if those products, if closed pod systems are banned. The bill introduces communication restrictions with existing customers. Clause 11.2 in the proposed bill will repeal section 24.1 of the current. Essentially, this entirely removes industry's ability to communicate with our existing customers. Simply, this means we cannot email to let existing customers know when a product is back in stock or that there is a new product available. We cannot provide customer services to existing customers, including troubleshooting, providing safe use information. SVRs currently, if this bill goes through, cannot even make product recommendations based on a customer's smoking cessation needs. As it is written, we cannot encourage or advise on available lower nicotine options for customers. We believe this is a breach of industry's right of freedom of expression and does not serve any purpose. The bill also introduces further restrictions on websites. So websites selling vaping products will be subject to the same restrictions as websites selling tobacco. This means no product images, no color, only words on a black and white background. No product information or descriptors are allowed beyond essentially brand and price. Industry will not even be able to provide information about the safe use of vaping products on websites, how to operate the child safety lock, or how to remove the battery safely. Vaping products are complicated. Consumers need to see the product and to be able to read a description of the product so they can make an informed choice. Furthermore, the website restriction does not serve any objective. ASH data shows only 1.7% of youth are accessing vaping products online. This restriction will inadvertently direct young people who are buying online to buy from unregulated overseas websites. Rather than censoring vaping websites, the bill could simply introduce the use of ID verification software, which is widely available. Treating vaping and smoking the same way creates a misperception that vaping is as harmful as smoking, which discourages smokers.
I do know that when Bruce Flavin had one of his liquor licenses renewal processes come through, the police flagged that as a particular problem. Well, can we collect a driver's license number?
Yeah.
But he said at the same time, but how do I verify that?
Mm-hmm.
And then we asked was it his merchant, National Bank, whether they would, if they could do a age verification as part of the transaction, but National Bank came back with saying no, we cannot do that, and we would not be able to do it unless the government allowed a law change. So you can't even punch in your credit card or debit card number. That at the moment legally, well, and I don't think it's changed, but that was not an available age verification option back in 2011 or 12. I think this is when Bruce, I think it was 2012 when he went through this. So that wasn't an option back then. It probably still is an option now because nothing's changed in the law.
But the thing is, too, is that if a kid wanted to buy a product online, they could just grab their parent's ID.
Exactly.
From doing that?
Exactly.
It is a privacy issue, too.
Yeah, you are so right. I mean, hey, I could be very cheeky. I could grab my grandmother's passport.
Yeah, why not?
And it will say 96-year-old buying it.
Yep.
Yeah, let's hear more for what he's got to say.
Is to switch to vaping products. Again, lastly, the bill introduces proximity restrictions. Early childhood education centre restrictions will effectively cap the number of SVRs. The government should really focus on quality rather than quantity of SVRs by tightening their eligibility criteria. Again, we've been saying this for years. Remove the store within a store concept by introducing minimum floor space or staffing requirements. Prohibit the sale of any products other than vaping products, and audit existing SVRs. If those three things were done, you would see a large shift in the number of SVRs currently in market. Thank you. I'll hand over for some questions.
Jonathan, thank you. Some good recommendations at the end. So just to recap those. So remove the store within a store setup that you see with dairies, and they chuck in those little stores at the front, and enforce minimum size and staffing requirements. You can't just have one person jumping from counter to counter. And then you said audit the existing SVRs. Was that correct?
That's correct.
And the other piece you mentioned, it was right at the start when you talked about this bill being an opportunity to do more around enforcement. And I know there have been some penalty increases. What would you have liked to have seen around increased enforcement?
I think that, when we met last time, I think, to be honest, we were excited. We felt like we were going to be heard and that there might be some positive change. And then this bill's come through, which is quite frankly a mess. We obviously want disposables gone, but now they've included pod systems, which are, again, not preferred by you, but preferred by adults.
No, we get the pod system argument. Yep.
Yeah, well, someone doesn't, because the importance of it's clear, yet it's included in this proposed ban. Obviously, what we discussed last time, audit the SVRs. SVRs, when the application or licensing regime came into place, essentially everyone and anyone applied for a license. There were no checks done on those sites, so they just got sent a license. So a lot of those operators are operating not knowing that they're actually not operating legally. So there needs to be an auditing process. We're a few years in now. We're paying a lot of money as an industry in terms of licensing fees, notification fees, and obviously tax. We just want someone to come around, knock on some doors and talk to the owners of these businesses and tell them what they should be doing. And if they can't comply, they got to go. It's that simple.
Do you think we should go harder on the, I know Cam and Ricardo have hands up. We might not get to both of you, sorry. Around the penalties for enforcement, and there have been a few more enforcements taken this year. I think we're up to 8 or something. We only had one last year. Do you think we need to go harder?
Eight's a joke. If this is an issue, as we're all discussing with youth, eight penalties is an absolute joke. There should be hundreds of them if this is an issue that government is committed to enforcing. The penalties should be higher than what they are now. Industry asks for them to be higher than what they are now, but that may be a deterrent.
Higher than $100,000?
But effectively, a lot of the conversation is about there's too many SVRs. SVRs serve a very important community function because smoking and tobacco, as you're all aware, is everywhere. So you need to have a safe, healthy alternative available. But a lot of those SVRs are not actually operating within the current framework of the legislation and the regulation. But that's not necessarily their fault because no one has actually told them what they should be doing. Industry tries, we have those conversations, but if they're not hearing it from the authorities, and when the authorities are turning up and they're confused, they actually are still as confused as they've ever been. Nothing changes. The website stuff, it's the ability to communicate to customers is outrageous. Like we can't even tell someone how to safely use a product or how to titrate reducing nicotine. We according to this bill, we cannot do that. Are there too many SVRs? And you look at some areas, yes, there are. But a lot of those would go if we just made some simple changes. An SVR should only sell vaping products, that's all. They shouldn't be a store within a store model. They should have staffing. That will clean up the industry very quickly as long as someone knows what they're doing when they knock on the door. It's not that complicated.
I hear you there. So SVRs only sell vaping products, no store within a store, minimum staffing and size requirements. And to do that, then you clean up a lot of those little general vape retailers that you see attached to dairies, and you clean up existing SVRs that aren't operating within.
Okay, I've heard, by the looks of that, submission has finished.
No commentary on that one? Because it's like the store within a store thing. That's the thing in my town.
That's a thing, and I can list that in many suburbs, even the posh, swanky suburb of Island Bay. However, I'm not sure about Kandala Township, but in the 6035 postcode, outside of Kandala Township, I have not come across a vape store that operates in a store-in-a-store model.
Ah, okay.
And if you would know exactly what I'm saying on that one, because Kandala is seen as a swanky suburb of rich people.
I think what you would find if you were to independently audit vaping stores in postcodes in low socioeconomic areas, you would find a significant number. I think
Nine Avalon, Taita.
Yeah, Taita, Nainai, Cannons Creek, Otara, Mangere, all these places. Well, you probably won't find them in Mission Bay or Ponsonby, in Auckland. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, look, the benefit of having small business and enterprise involved in what you're doing, or taking the lead on this sort of thing, is they want to be entrepreneurial. They want to sell more stuff through the people coming in the door because that's their business model. Now, does it matter what it is that they themselves think that they're selling? No, they just want it to be easier for them to sell it, and that's the whole thing with this stupid bill. And so, I guess the other point I'm trying to make is that it is right and just that adults are able to make an informed decision. Their children, on the other hand, tamariki, mukupuna, and young people, they don't always get to make that informed decision. That's why we're the adults in the room and they are not. And so, I'm okay with people who are adults wanting to vape. The percentage that he gives, about 1.6 or 1.7%, that go to websites of young people. Obviously, they're monitoring the traffic. I would be very concerned about who's accessing my data off the back of industry being aware of trends in buyer behaviour, to be frank. It tells me, though, that a good percentage of people who are visiting their website are adults. And so if they want to make their informed decision, not a problem, it's up to them. But these kids, they don't get that luxury.
No, and they don't understand the consequences either of the damage that doing smoking can do to their health. They don't understand that yet.
Well, that's right, and they'll get to understand that as things just become possibly respiratorily a bigger issue for them as they get older. What I found interesting about that particular submission, though, Sam, in particular that submission, is just the double narratives that come out, the whiz bangers.
It's defining a fence to sit on to have it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, look, I find it offensive that we were consulted on this bill. Oh, mate, come on, son. That's you trying to look like the Pope when you're really bloody Pontius Pilate, So, yeah, people who are seasoned observers of this sort of stuff pick up on the double narratives pretty quickly. And so that's what that was. That was an exercise in let's get in there and do our best, but at the same time tell them a few things that will make us look like saints. So and Sam, it's not somebody needs to write to Sam and say, Sam, it's not your job as chairman. You're not running a corporate entity or a Deloitte consulting practice or whatever it is. It's not your job to summarize the evidence of a submitter in such a way as to market the submission as you're saying these things. Oh, well, good on you, mate. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I can tell you right now, James Meagher doesn't go to that extreme.
Yeah, James, yeah.
I'm just speaking from personal experience on that one. I would say that's on camera. On behind camera, we've had a very good good discussion, and he said it would be nice to get It's in the Ballot down to Timaru.
Right about now, it'd be good if anything went down to Timaru to save James Meagher.
The theories are a bit...
So I guess what I'm trying to say throughout all this is be conscious of the double narratives that come bearing gifts.
Yeah. Now we're going to shift to the Crown Minerals Amendment Bill. Now this is going to be a weird one, but thank you, Laura, for picking this up.
No problem.
Kick off from submitter Chloe Swarbrick.
Here on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and nearly 4,000 New Zealanders who signed on to this submission in the mere 4 days that the government gave the public to organise themselves. And I know that this is in addition to the 36,000 New Zealanders who signed on to our petition to keep the oil and gas ban in place, which I'll be submitting to the Environment Select Committee on Thursday, the 17th of October. So here we are. Nearly 2 years ago, almost 2 million Aucklanders watched as our city went underwater. A few weeks later, similar devastation visited the Hawke's Bay. And in the last few days, Otago has been confronted with the latest in climate change charged extreme weather. Whether it's Northland, Auckland, the East Coast, the West Coast, Canterbury Plains, top of the South, or the Deep South, whether it's flood or it's drought, all of the politicians here know that the more carbon emissions that our decisions enable, the worse and the more frequent that those life-threatening weather events become. If any of you disagree with the science, I dare you to speak up. If you don't, then you accept the science. And those of you who intend to wave this bill through, do so, knowing full well that what you are doing is making the active, conscious, and informed decision to increase emissions and make the lives of the people that you say you represent so much harder. This isn't an academic debate anymore. Climate change charged weather events are the direct experience of New Zealanders. It is within this committee's power to mitigate climate changing emissions or to choose to increase those emissions to line the pockets of fossil fuel executives, which is what this bill represents. Now, the Coalition promised to make decisions based on data and evidence, so here is some data and evidence. In 2021, the International Energy Agency found that in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, there could be no new oil and gas fields approved for development. That was 3 years ago. We already have over 30 renewable energy projects consented or near consented in this country, but they haven't been built because of structural profit-driven issues within the electricity sector. Gas production peaked in Aotearoa, New Zealand back in 2001 and has been steadily falling since 2014, 4 years before the exploration ban was put in place. It takes an average of 16 years to take an oil and gas field in this country from exploration to production. The Prime Minister glibly thanked me for informing him about this at question time a few weeks ago, but it's got to be one of the most brain-melting facts to understand about what this government is trying to push through. Committee members, if you help push this law through, you lock our country into exploration and production of more climate-burning fossil fuels, not just 3 years after the International Energy Agency told everyone to stop doing precisely that, but you lock us into producing and depending on fossil fuels 16 plus years into the future. Now, if you want a resilient energy system, investment in distributed renewable energy is our future, but you actively undermine that with this bill. The government's own initial advice shows that the reversal of this oil and gas ban would produce 3 times the number of emissions that are being reduced in the government's own draft emissions reduction plan. Yet somehow, even worse, is the additional change to the purpose of the Crown Minerals Act from managing mining to promoting mining. In practice, this means that the Crown will no longer exercise its responsibility to manage how mining occurs, where mining takes place, and to regulate whether or not mining is taking place in an environmentally responsible manner. The idea that publicly elected officials in the 21st century would be actively cheerleading extractive industries instead of ensuring that our planet's scarce resources and delicately balanced life-giving climate is protected, frankly, beggars belief. Then there is the changes to the decommissioning regime, which is profoundly irresponsible and unjustifiable, whichever way you look at it. Decommissioning of oil fields like the Tui oil field left deserted in 2019 and the financial collapse of Tamarins Taranaki have cost the country, the taxpayers that the coalition government loves to talk about, close to $500 million. Yet here we're presented with a law change not to create greater protections from this kind of financial liability, but to actively weaken them. So committee members, if you rubber stamp this bill, you are choosing not only to pour oil and gas on the climate crisis fire, not only to turn ministers into cheerleaders for that, but also to increase the financial liability for the government and everyday New Zealanders. Passing this bill will allow greater flexibility around financial securities for fossil fuel companies. Changing trialling liability means that past operators or permit holders of oil fields will no longer have responsibility for those oil fields. Weakening post-decommissioning liability removes requirements for fossil fuel companies to provide payments as security of the potential risk of those oil fields. Combined, these are beyond belief hall passes to an industry that is directly responsible for a large proportion of global emissions, to go out and to take risky decisions to explore for oil and gas and to drill our environment with little concern for being held to account or responsible for any issues or major problems. But wait, there's more. You also know that this bill poses huge international legal and reputational risks. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade advised the government that reversing the ban is, and I quote, inconsistent with the obligation in several of New Zealand's free trade agreements not to reduce environmental protections for the purposes of encouraging trade or investment, end quote. And this could be legally challenged by a trading partner. MFAT also states that reversing the ban, and I quote, could be received as New Zealand not intending to meet its nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, unless appropriate measures are taken to demonstrate how the additional emissions will be offset, end quote. Yet, Treasury and the Ministry for the Environment have warned that the cost of overseas offsets required to meet that nationally determined contribution could cost up to $23 billion by 2030. The main method the government has to reduce that cost is rapid domestic emissions reduction, but this bill does the opposite of that. And then there's the risk to our oceans. We all know the significant impacts that an oil spill can have. We only need to look at the Deepwater Horizon blowout in the Gulf of Mexico, which spilled over 450 million litres of oil into the Gulf, smothering and drowning marine life in oil. For an illustration closer to home, the Rena oil spill, Aotearoa, New Zealand's worst environmental maritime disaster, saw over 1,000 birds die after being doused in oil and cost $700 million to clean up. Then there's the seismic blasting, an incredibly destructive exploration practice where seismic air guns let off blasts every 8 seconds. These blasts are torture for marine mammals like dolphins and whales and can last 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for months at a time. Nothing about oil and gas drilling is good for marine ecosystems and life. And the cost of a blowout or an oil spill in Aotearoa, not just economically, but socially and environmentally, will be immeasurable and long-lasting. But you all know
and it will
all of
cost the
this.
taxpayer a lot
Government
of money.
members, if you choose to wave this bill through, you do so knowing about the real-world harm that you are choosing to increase. You do so knowing that you are, based on the data and evidence, choosing not to mitigate, but to actively increase the frequency and severity of climate change-charged weather events ravaging this country. You do so knowing about the costs that you could impose on New Zealanders, the damage to our reputation and the legal risk that ensues. You do so knowing about the potential damage to our oceans and the wildlife that call it home. You do so knowing that you could make a different choice. You can stand on the right side of history to actively improve things for people and planet instead of actively choosing to make them worse. You have the power and you are responsible for what happens next. And you should know that when the Greens are next in government, we will reinstate the scientifically necessary ban on oil and gas exploration, and we will revoke any permits that you issue for drilling. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I've got nothing. I've got nothing bad to say about what Chloe submitted. I mean, she's passionate, etc. But two things. Number one, what we're seeing is a repivoting of the Green Party into climate justice and that sort of narrative. And I wonder whether or not that is the pivot now of the Green Party to get back to their basics or get back to their base, because their base are looking at them thinking, how did you go so far, so wrong, so quickly? The second thing is I'm not a big fan or in favour of politicians using the select committee process themselves for submissions. You are an elected representative, you have your time in Parliament. The select committee process for 10 minutes or so is for members of the public and organisations to submit on their thoughts on particular bills. It's not for politicians to, no matter where they come from, to use the select committee process in the body of a sitting Parliament to ply their views. That's not what the select committee process is for. If you want to do it that way, become a lobbyist with some organisation outside of the body politic in Parliament. It's for the people. It's not for politicians. That's the second thing. Nothing in what Chloe says is a surprise. I mean, I think every time this government hears the word science or scientific, they have an allergic reaction that will probably form the basis of some child's thesis in the course or PhD studies in the coming years. This government doesn't understand that even just for the basics. For example, and I mentioned it before about how this government likes to say, we're better economic managers than everybody else in the other lot. Just watch us go, go, go. Well, the problem that I've got with this whole, the whole Crown Minerals stuff is that the evidence quite clearly tells us that the economic return on investment versus the environmental impact is just non-existent. I mean, 3% of royalties on average, I think, is what the Crown extracts from this. And even for the royalties to work, we might be able to get everything from PAYE to profits that could be taxable remaining in New Zealand, etc., etc. But no, these mining companies, largely from Australia, will pick it up and transport it back to their home country for their own shareholders. So,
wait, we export all of our crude oil.
Well, yeah,
We don't even use it here.
it's just it's absolutely it's fantasy. But the classic example of where governments overstep their mark and their reach is in the case of what's going on with the off Taranaki. It's been very clear that multiple entities in the branches of our judiciary and government and process have indicated very clearly that it is a dud deal. So. But no, that's all right. We're going to usurp everything. Sorry, my dog is yelping again.
We've got an interesting one here. New Plymouth City Council.
And if you would like to start by introducing your colleague and speak to the submission, and if there is any time left, there might be questions from members. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui. My name is Neil Holdham, and I'll be one of your mayors today. And with me is Councillor Tony Bedford. He's the Deputy Chair of our Strategy and Operations Committee and co-signee on our submission. So thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I'll take our submission as read, and I'll just start with our kaupapa on behalf of New Plymouth District Council. Our objectives are to see New Zealand significantly reduce emissions, to maintain the reliability of our national energy sector, to ensure affordability for New Zealanders in terms of their access to energy, and to continue to underpin New Zealand's strong economic performance. I just want to acknowledge our government for taking advice before taking a decision on this important matter, and also for allowing people to make public submissions. I note that in 2018, when the previous administration made the decision, they took no advice and allowed no public submissions and just put it through. And I note that there was a comment made about why the energy sector has been reluctant to invest by Chloe Swarbrick. And the reason is because of the massive damage that was done to New Zealand's reputation in terms of sovereign risk when we threw the process out the window and basically developed policy on the fly based on a media release from the Prime Minister at a university gathering. I sat down with the Prime Minister at the time in 2018 and provided those goals that I've articulated to you. And then we described the two scenarios that New Zealand had ahead of it. And the first one was the one that we were focused on, which was if we get it right. If we get it right, we can significantly reduce emissions. We can early switch to lower carbon fuels, e.g. for transport, to lower the carbon content of gas by things like biogas, carbon capture and sequestration, and also transitioning to hydrogen. We could maintain reliability of our energy sector by using a diverse energy sources and growing the availability of other plant to provide energy for New Zealand. That energy prices would reflect domestic resource availability. In other words, we could maintain price stability, and the existing infrastructure that New Zealanders have invested in could be used as an economic way to transport and store energy. And that the industry will be capable of competing on total cost of production, including emissions, and that we retain our engineering skills and deploy them into new areas of sustainability, sustainable energy generation. So that was if we got it right. And then if we got it wrong, that we would see continued use of high carbon fuels like we have lately, i.e. that we replace gas with coal. And I note that this year we've seen a record increase in the amount of coal New Zealand has burned to keep the energy system operating, and that Huntly has ordered 350,000 tonnes of coal to get us through next year due to the shortage of gas. We would see poor levels of reliability, and we've seen, I think we've had 4 grid emergencies in the last 4 years, that we've seen domestic shortages driving up energy costs, and you've seen the price of the spot market, the closure of those 2 North Island mills. We've seen Tiwai reduce production and Methanex cease production, and what we've done is, we've chucked our emissions over the fence. Those products that would have been produced by predominantly clean New Zealand energy will be now produced in economies offshore with using coal and higher emission fuels, and we'll see industry closures without lowering global emissions. So from my perspective, the energy policy in 2018 defied the science. They never took any advice from any scientists, and they never really looked at what it would take the energy sector to change. We've advocated for a smooth transition where we can maintain, as I say, reduce emissions, maintain reliability, ensure affordability, and continue New Zealand's strong economic performance. And we see no point in swapping out gas for coal, which is what the last policy did. So we're supportive of this legislation, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Holdham, and thank you, Councillor Tony. We have questions from members. Steve Abel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your submission. I wonder, Mayor, if the challenge you face being the heart of the oil and gas industry in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is that the ability for you and your advocacy to look at the big picture, which is on a global scale, we need to transition away from oil, gas and coal, and looking for new oil and gas is not what the International Energy Agency say we should be doing. And so what my question is beyond oil, gas and coal, and I've heard your submission on why you think we should keep looking for it, what are the other ways that you can be creating jobs and employment and security of energy in your region? Because we do have to transition away from those fossil fuels if we're going to have a livable planet.
Sure, look, and just as a background, I've got 20 years in the energy sector. I'm actually really passionate about decarbonisation. I've been working on it long before I got involved in council. I was actively part of the Drive electric crew, encouraging charging infrastructure and things, looking at vehicle emissions. But I think the key issue is, if you look globally, all of the more, I suppose, sophisticated emissions reduction policy is you tackle coal first. Gas is seen as a transition fuel to buy us time to grow the supply of renewable energy resources available, because we know that we have to overbuild renewables to provide a steady stream of income of energy during those times of peak demand. At the moment, we've got a shortage of gas. When we have a shortage of water in the lakes, we burn coal and we drive our emissions up, or we close industry. So I think at a global level, we have to realise that shutting off methanol production in New Zealand from gas doesn't reduce global demand for methanol. It just means methanol will be produced based from coal with higher emissions. Shutting off the gas industry in New Zealand means that essentially we're going to export jobs overseas and drive New Zealanders out of business. So at a global level, I think what we should do is let's get rid of the most significant emissions first and buy ourselves time to bring on things like offshore wind, things like biofuels, and those things that steadily increase the availability of renewable supply. But to basically say we're going to kill the gas industry, we don't know what's going to fill it, and we don't actually have a plan for that, but we're hoping that international investors that we spooked with this decision will somehow come and save the day for us by investing in other technologies. It's a hope strategy as opposed to an achievable plan.
Steve, your hand is still up. Do you have a supplementary, or is it no?
I don't want to get in front of Willie if there's only time for one question, but my sup was only...
No. All right. So you don't have a question, go to...
I do have a sup, actually, but I don't want to suffer.
No.
My sup is really whether just very quickly,
right,
to answer, but is whether the Mayor has seen the contemporary research that coal is actually a cleaner fuel than gas when you take into account fugitive emissions.
I haven't seen that, but I suppose I informed a lot of my stuff on the work of Dr. David Prentice from the Interim Climate Change Committee and their report, which I contributed to, which essentially advocated the position that we've had, that we should be reducing coal and replacing it with gas until such time as we've got renewables available to fill the supply.
All right. Quick question from Honourable Willie Jackson.
Hey, Neil.
Yes, Willie?
You'd be totally out of sync with all the Māoris down there, wouldn't you? Given the strategies and that have, you know how strong the protest has been, and of course you've got your committee who supports the council. There would be a Māori who supports you down there, Neil. Would that be right?
I don't know. Are you speaking on behalf of them?
Oh, I think I can, because I'm related to them.
Okay.
I do have, as you well know, but they're very opposed to what you're talking about, aren't they?
I don't speak on behalf of Tangata Whenua. But I think the reality is it depends on who you talk to in terms of what the answer you get. But the reality is we developed an economic strategy with Mana Whenua just prior to the Labour government or the coalition government shock announcement, and it talked about our desire to have a managed transition into more renewables, and that's all we've looked for. But as I say, what you've done is essentially caused massive energy rationing.
Can I just ask?
All right, no, members, we don't have time. We don't have. We have to stop there. Willie Jackson, we'll have to stop there. We don't have.
You didn't give me the answer, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay. So nowhere in that submission did I hear urgency for transition. It's like, what about Onslow? What about why can't we do offshore windmills now? Why can't we do that stuff now so we can ease pressure on gas production? Oh, I wonder why. Yeah.
I've been involved in this discussion, in particular in Australia, for a very long time. And again, I come back to the same reinforceable point I keep on making about the double narrative. The word you'll hear often in what's talked about is transition. And also the second part you'll hear is look, we're not going to distract you from the real issue, which is the environment, the climate change, and the economic reasoning and rationale for all this nonsense, which is, but at least coal is cleaner than gas, and gas is cleaner than coal. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Sorry, can you hear that squealing?
No.
I've transitioned to the kitchen.
Ah, okay. Quick transition to the kitchen. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, if we can only get our government to transition over to green energy as quickly as that, that'd be
Well,
fantastic.
I think too, the way I'd also explain this, team, is that look, technology is such today that the things that we thought were not possible 10 years ago are possible now.
Yep.
There are things that we can do now that the climate change emergency, which is what I would say it is so present in what we're doing every day, that New Zealanders themselves are becoming savvy to the changes that need to be made. Hey, you be quiet. So, I think, can you hear that?
Yeah, I can hear her.
I won't tell you what she's done. That means that I'm down this end of the house.
Oh, okay. I don't need to know.
This is called Vengeance is Mine, and I will take vengeance on you this very evening. All right.
Okay. So we're hitting 10 o'clock, so time to sit there and talk about the submissions that are closing over the next foreseeable future. We've got the Sentencing Amendment Bill closes on the 29th of October. We got the Arms Shooting Clubs, Shooting Ranges, Other Matters Amendment Bill closing on the 29th of October. The District Court Judge Amendment Bill to lift the District Court numbers by 1 closes on the 29th. I suggest something higher. We got the Marine Coastals, was it Takutai Moana Customary Marine Title Amendment Bill closes this Tuesday the 15th. And we've got the Regulatory System Primary Industries Bill closes this Friday. So if you're out there for any submissions out there, definitely get on there. And just for a bit of an update on what's happening with the getting to partnership, we are getting a bit closer. Anyone who is wondering what happened tonight, I changed the settings that you had to be a subscriber in order to post a comment. But the reason why was so we could get more subscribers. That was the only reason why. Because as you would see on there, we on our watch hours are creeping up to 3,000 very quickly. But our subscribers are quite lagging behind. And, if we get to 500 subscribers and 3,000 cumulative watch hours, we can bring in super chats.
Yes.
And I think Matt, who just keeps jumping in and out. And
I love it. It's like he's jumping in and out of the wormhole.
I'm listening. I don't want you to feel as if though I'm not participating when I've got a very, a very cunning dog.
Yes.
Oh, we will kick it up there. Matt, if you want to stay for after shows, post chats, these are always great conversations where you can sit there and say really, really, really what we want that we don't want to have to be published on the front page of the New Zealand Herald or they post.
So, I'm strangely comfortable with people posting on the front page of the New Zealand Herald what I may or may not have said, and usually it's I may have said. Can I just share something before I head off and have to go and deal with a climate emergency of my own that might resemble a brown doggy oil slick? With their operation.
Get an oil spill.
Yeah, let's just say I'm pleased it's out. I was nervous it might have to be another trip to the vet. So, cup on. Anyway, what I would say is that I honestly do think that we're in the wrong discussion here. I think we should be, not us three, well, we three. I think what we need to do is refocus our effort and our energy in what creates a better democracy, not take away from the work of many others over a long period of time. Yeah, we need to refine it on the odd occasion, but the select committee process must and should be an opportunity for everyday New Zealanders to be heard. And that's been the problem over the last couple of years. A lot of people just feel as if they haven't been heard.
They feel like it's a rubber stamping process.
Yeah, and it's going to not be a rubber stamping process. And it might be controversial, but in one of those discussions, if I was to contribute to where our future lies, I would love to see the return of an upper house. You know what? It would probably cost less than a flag referendum per annum, for crying out loud.
I mean, I mean, that's the 150. See, I'm personally in favour of lifting the MPs up to 150 and change the seat ratio that works out the number of electorates from the South Island divided by 16 to the South Island divided by 20. And then ultimately you want to shift that to 25 to kick in at some point in the future. But that's because I believe our electorates are at the point where they actually are becoming too big to manage, particularly by area.
Well, look, I mean, we certainly don't have the same problem with some of the biggest electorates across the Tasman are bigger than the size of New Zealand, I think, from memory.
Northern Territory, I think they only have 2 MPs.
Yeah, I think on that basis, Sam, what will end up happening is that the population demographic of New Zealand will require us to do that anyway.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm talking about is we've got to be much more judicious, that sounds like a horrible word, to our approach to what makes a better democracy for the times that we currently live in, knowing full well that we will probably over generations have the same ongoing discussion about perfecting that sort of democracy.
Yes.
Democracy in and of itself isn't a perfect enterprise. It never was. I mean, all you have to do is have a look at the Greeks and let's just say their recalcitrant next door neighbours, the Spartans, or have a look at what happened in Macedonia, or have a look at what happened in Syria, and so on and so forth. I mean, things just change over time.
Yeah.
But to accept that actually we're getting a more corporatized style of democracy, where our cabinet meetings are being run like board meetings, or where the process or function and form of government is left to those who otherwise used to. I mean, shit. I mean, we used to hear a lot from farmers and unionists. Now we hear a lot from consultants who used to work for the Big Four, who are now electorate MPs. I mean, what an absolute... It shouldn't preclude them from being members of Parliament, of course, but yeah, we're changing, and we're not changing. Our system isn't changing to reflect the demands and the pressure on society. That's my last rant, because basically the dog has gone and taken a shit all over the kitchen floor.
Piggy, you wouldn't do that, would you now?
Oh, can I just say, I used to have a cat, but the cat's packed her bags and decided enough's enough.
What, couldn't work with the dog?
No, the dog's just looking at me like a poster child from a Japanese ramen store.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will see.
Sorry, I probably overshared.
So my final thoughts in regards to Chloe. So it's not something I would have done if I was in a similar position, but she cooked. I really enjoyed that speech of hers. It's like, well, that's why she's the leader, the captain of the ship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good on.
Okay. We will now. We're not sure if the House is going to go to urgency this week. Hopefully not. But we should be back here at 8 o'clock next Sunday. Hopefully not having to do a 3 p.m. urgency special, because so much shit happened that needed to be said to the public.
Talking about shit.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I'll see everyone here back here at 8 p.m. next Sunday. Have a good evening.
All right.
Bye, guys. I got to go.
Thank you for watching The Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened, so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/It's in the Ballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's in the Ballot Productions, live at